specific questions. Hopefully, I'll answer some of them in my presentation.
Yes.
You know, and hopefully that will spur some from the audience as well.
Okay. I mean, specifically for you, I have in the lead up. Oh, sorry. This as the first Finovate conference in Asia. In the lead up to it, how have you found things? Did you go searching for innovative startups, or did they come looking for you when you started to publicize the event?
I'm
kind of
happy
obvious.
to answer that question. That's a perfectly good question.
Okay. Okie doke. So generally, how have you found Finovate here? Has it, has it been an easy ride for you, or is it?
You know, like most things, it's been easy in ways we didn't expect, and harder in ways we didn't expect. You know, I think that overall the reception has been tremendously positive. You know, I think the challenges of the time difference, as well as just sort of that slow process of meeting people and finding companies, and it's always a challenge the first time we go to a new continent and do a conference.
Sure, I can understand. Where are you actually based then?
We're based in Seattle. So,
okay. So you're there now, are you?
I am.
Okay. Well, I'm in the UK, so I don't know what time of day it is for you.
It is quite late. I certainly will, happily head to bed after this call. But the nature of global business is always someone's always asleep.
Yes, indeed. Oh goodness. Oh dear, oh dear. Can I just check with you? How do I pronounce Melissa's surname?
Guzzi? I'm not sure. We'll have to ask her. I don't know for sure.
Oh, okay. I did check with Ricardo. I gather he's Uti. Okay. Eric, are you comfortable with the format that this is going to take?
I think it's a great format. I think that I should be in about the 10-minute time range, and judging from Melissa's and Ricardo's slides, I think they can sort of hit that window roughly as well, and then a little Q&A seems fine.
Okay.
Lavina was saying that you have about 40 people signed up to attend, so that's great.
Good.
I don't know what sort of participation you normally get from them in terms of questions, but
it's difficult. It kind of varies, I think, depending on the teleconsult that we do. But the fact there's a good number signed up, hopefully there'll be some questions in from the crowd.
Well, I think that we have at least 3 sort of very different viewpoints here in terms of what we watch and what we look at. Obviously, a couple investors in Ricardo and Melissa, but very different perspectives in some ways, and then I have a totally different viewpoint from where I sit. So hopefully it'll be an interesting mix of content.
Indeed.
Hello, guys. This is Ricardo. Can you hear me?
Oh, good morning. Good afternoon to you. It's Carol Wheatcroft here.
Hi, Carol. How are you?
Hi. I'm fine, thank you.
I've been hearing you guys, and I dialed in from the phone, and I was speaking, but I realized you can hear me, so then I figured out that the WebEx has a functionality to call my direct line, so that's what I did now.
Oh, good. And you can hear us clearly, can you?
Very, very clearly, yes.
Oh, that's good. Okay, that's excellent. So let me just check with you too, Ricardo. It is Ricardo Uti to pronounce your name correctly.
It's funny that you asked, so then never mind, because people call me different. It depends on the country where I am, right? So it's a Japanese name, so it's like Ouchi, but that's too challenging to pronounce.
I'm so sorry. Ouchi. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I
Ouchi.
would never have guessed that from the spelling.
Yeah, I know. That's what most of the people don't. So no, never mind. It doesn't matter really. I'm used to any variations. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, let me try and get it right, and I apologize if I get it wrong.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Let me just ask you too. I've just asked Eric this. Are there any particular questions you would like to see raised? I'm happy to pretend someone else raised them and ask the question. Yeah.
No, I mean, no particular question. I'm here to support Eric and you guys. I'm really keen to see Finovate here. I think one of the issues, and I put in one slide, not to be too provocative, but I see if we compare other ecosystems like in the Valley and even somehow in Europe, I think here in Asia I see a lot of deals, but I see somehow a lack of creativity.
Okay.
And
we can explore that.
There are VCs here, there are deals, but I think that less comparing to other places, I mean, a lower quality type of deals. So hence, I'm very keen to get and see Finovate here because, I mean, it's a strong brand and then will naturally attract global talents to come and I mean, Asia itself is a huge market. So, I mean, startups normally, if they start somewhere else, it takes a while for them to come and become in the growth stage and come to Asia. But we want more the early stage and we want more of those creativity here. We'll get there, but it will take time, and that's why, I mean, Finovate is one of the steps towards that. So that's why I'm here. Of course, to take any questions and share more a bit about City Ventures and what we are after. But that's pretty much it. So no particular questions. Okay,
now that sounds good. That sounds good. When you say you think there's a lack of creativity, how do you describe that? They're not very innovative, the ideas you're seeing, or they're a bit too obvious, or how do you mean?
Yeah, I think a bit so. So you take like biggest market, let's say China, for example. It's traditionally seen as a copycat, right? So you take like big ideas from the U.S. like eBay, like Facebook, and so on and so forth. They've done the same thing, but with a Chinese brand and Chinese owner. And because the market is so big, it's 1.3 billion people, I mean, they don't care about the rest of the world. If they win the local market, they're done, right? And then when they're done there, then they think about scaling across Asia and some other markets. And then you take other places like, for example, Singapore, where we are, right? So there's a lot of government support. There are some VCs here. But if you look at, I mean, I don't know, Eric might have a different view, or maybe he agree with me, but if you look at successful entrepreneurs, one of the key things that I observe is that those are the guys who found problems in life. And they went and they want to try to solve for this problem by opening their business, right? In Singapore, I mean, you don't see much problems because, I mean, there's no many problems here. The government fixes everything. And there are very few things to fix and to find solutions for. So I think that's a bit, and partially a bit of a cultural thing as well, right? They're less aggressive. They're more conservative. If you take top students, they prefer to go and work for a consulting company or big banks or large corporations as opposed to go and try their own company, right? So that is, I think, the key challenge.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. That's funny. I lived in so I'm in the UK at the minute, Ricardo. I actually lived in Singapore in the back end of the 90s, in the early 2000s. And I was actually working for Asian Banker at that time. And I remember writing a piece for the Asian Banker on venture capitalism at that time. And from what you're saying, it doesn't sound to me like things have changed hugely. Because we were seeing very similar things at that stage.
Yeah, maybe back then we didn't have as many VCs as you have
No,
today.
that's true. There was nothing like the volume, but you know, the message sounded as though it was pretty similar.
Yeah. The country has also evolved phenomenally since then. And a lot of more things, a lot of more investments. It continues to evolve and improve as we go, and that's the exciting part about it.
Yeah. Yes. Indeed.
So I would chime in here and say that, I mean, I agree with Ricardo that, you know, that some of the creativity isn't yet there, but when you look at, I think you're actually going to see sort of two waves. And I think you're going to see a first wave of sort of Me Too entrepreneurship across the region, and I think Ricardo was alluding to this, where it's copying ideas that have been successful, whether they're in the U.S. or Europe, and for a particular country. And, you know, I think this will exist in fintech as much as it's going to exist in photo sharing or, you know, social networking or e-commerce or any of these things. And I don't think it's a terrible first wave, because I actually think there will be some successes that come out of it. And in some ways, it's an easier learning path for that generation of entrepreneurs that sort of comes along and you know, starts to change, you know, the cultures in some of these places. And then I think there will be a sort of second, you know, wave that follows on the heels of that very quickly, in terms of, you know, great, all of you were successful, you know, now we have some angel investors, now we have some models to look at, now we have some VCs who had successful exits, you know, and so there's more desire to invest in this space. And so I think the second wave is where you see more of the creativity. You know, that being said, I think there will be creativity in the first wave as well. It's just, you know, as Ricardo points out, it's harder because of some cultural factors. So, you know, I think you've got this two-wave thing coming, and it'll be really fun to watch just sort of across Asia as the two waves sort of, you know, crest and lead to a lot of really cool things.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Makes sense.
Yeah. I see we have our first attendee.
So we're starting at 4, correct?
Yes, that's correct. So in about 10 minutes. So I'm going to mute the line until then. If you could just hang on.
Yeah, and one question though. One, you guys can hear me well. Is there too much background noise, or is that okay?
I can hear you well. It would be a good idea, if you're not speaking, if you could just put yourself on mute. Have you got
we'll do that.
A mute that? Yeah. That's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, and the second question is, what is the flow? Will Eric start first, and then who comes next?
Oh, sorry. Yes. The way it will work is I'll just give a brief introduction. Eric will go first, then it's Melissa. I hope she joins us. And then it's you, Ricardo. And then we have a Q&A, and then I'll just close the session off.
Okay. And the Q&A is through the chat, or is like voice Q&A?
It will be voice. I will ask the questions and you know, direct them to either know, to whoever.
Oh, okay.
Carol, are you advancing the slides, or is that Lavina?
That's Lavina. So if you could give some sound pointers to Lavina to advance the slide, please, when you speak.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm Lisa. So.
Good morning, good afternoon, good morning. Welcome everybody to this teleconsultation. Teleconsultation is entitled Emerging Technology Trends in Finance, Payments and Innovation. I'd just like to outline what will happen during this session. We're going to hear from three speakers who have very different perspectives of venture capitalism. And then we will be going to a question and answer session where we will invite those listening in to submit their questions. Okay, so I'm very pleased to welcome and introduce our speakers. First up, we have Eric Matson, who is CEO of Finovate. Finovate, as a showcase for innovative ideas, will be holding their first conference in Singapore next week, building on their success in other parts of the world. Eric will talk about the idea behind Finovate and identify some of the key trends in innovation that have led to the innovative ideas showcased at their conferences. And I understand his presentation will be referencing specific companies, many of whom are Asian, who will be presenting at Finovate Asia next week. Next, we have Melissa Guzzi, founder and managing partner at Arbor Partners Asia, a venture capital firm who invest in companies with innovative ideas to help them fly. Melissa will share her thoughts about some of the drivers that are influencing new innovations, including savvy Generation Y and big data, and then share with you a couple of examples where Arbor Partners, as venture capitalists, have made investments. I'm sure there'll be questions about how Arbor Partners decides where to place its investments, so please do feel free to ask. Our third presenter is Richard Ouchi, who is director at City Ventures. From the banking side, Ricardo brings yet another perspective, and he and his team identify drivers and trends that are changing the banking landscape. Ricardo will explain how they predict the likely impact that these drivers and trends will have, and use this as a guide to their own corporate investing. We will then have a question and answer session, but please do feel free to send me your questions at any point. Simply click on the chat button in the bottom right-hand corner and send the question either to host, just send the question to host, and it will reach me. Okay, now if we could hear from Eric Matson of Finovate. Could you put Eric's slide up, please?
Excellent.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Carol. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, indeed. Please go ahead.
Excellent. Thank you. So I thought I'd start off with just a brief overview of Finovate, just to set the stage, and then dive into some of the trends we're seeing. So Finovate is a showcase of new innovations in financial, banking, payments, and investing technology. Basically anything dealing with money or technology, we wanted at our events. And we select those ideas through sort of a competitive application process to really try and find the biggest and best and newest and most novel things. And then we showcase them in what is sort of a unique format. We have a demonstration-only format where no slides are allowed, and the companies are asked to get on stage and in 7 minutes or less show what they've built and really let the audience judge based on the actual technology rather than a slide deck. And then we mix that with some great networking for the companies, for the attendees. And, the audiences at Finovate are very much a gathering of everyone from the banks to the regulators to the investors to the press to the analysts to the entrepreneurs. And it's really designed to be a room full of people to push innovation forward. So in a nutshell, Finovate is all about new technology and fintech, and finance and banking, and showcasing it in a fun new format. So if you would go forward a slide for me. Excellent. So Finovate, in a brief history, we first launched Finovate in 2007 with one conference in New York, 20 innovations being showcased, and 200 attendees. Roughly 5 years later, in 2012, we have 4 conferences around the globe: London, San Francisco, New York, and Singapore. And this year we will have 200 innovations and more than 3,000 total attendees across all the events. So, a tremendous amount of interest in innovation in the financial space, in the banking space, in the technology space. It's a very exciting time, and we're happy to be part of it. So if you go forward one more slide for me. So, why am I here talking to you today? Partly because Ricardo has been very supportive in helping us bring Finovate to Asia, and Melissa has, been doing some great stuff. And the Asian banker is nice enough to host this and be one of our partners for the first Finovate Asia. Next week in Singapore, we'll be hosting it at a beautiful new facility called the Max Atria. If you want more details, you can go to finovateasia.com. And we will be doing, in a single day, 36 great demos of new technology. We've got about 300 attendees signed up already, and you can see a list here of some of the organizations that you would expect, ranging from Barclays to Standard Chartered to Visa to Citi Ventures to ANZ. It's going to be a great group. So next slide, please, if you would. But I'm really here to talk to you about some of the trends that we are seeing in financial technology right now. And some of these, they're really just going to be clear to you and pretty obvious, but I want to touch on them some. And I'm going to summarize these, and then I'll go into some specific examples of the companies that are doing demonstrations of new technology next week, and talk a little bit about some specific innovation. So the trend, mobile. We are seeing so much in mobile, it is amazing. And that ranges from tablets and designing user interfaces for tablets to trying to do mobile CRM and really personalize the consumer's experience to leveraging geolocation. User experience, whether it's designing better interfaces for mobile devices or laptop, web interfaces, personalization using, data analytics, or even things like gamification. We're seeing a ton of emphasis on building better user experiences. Big data, I don't think this comes as a surprising one, but how you use data, whether it's what you already have or new sources, how you analyze it with better analytics, how you do things like risk modeling in intelligent new ways, and even things like accounting and how you do that better, we're seeing innovation in, which is exciting. Security. Security is a huge trend that we're seeing a lot of activity in, and it ranges from things for security for mobile, leveraging sort of crowdsourcing to try and do better security across a group of people or a group of financial institutions, biometrics, a ton of security activity right now, and it's completely understandable as we spend more and more of our lives online or on our mobile devices. And then a fifth trend is just sort of this idea of the crowd and social and peer-to-peer, whether it's in lending, trading, currency, collaboration on innovation. It's really an exciting time to sort of see these trends, explode and start to drive a lot of innovation. So if you would go forward a slide for me. Trend number one, mobile. So I picked out 3 quick examples here of companies doing demonstrations next week at Finovate Asia that I want to highlight. The first, Sandstone, is doing this really interesting thing with sort of a next generation banking solution for internet and mobile, but they're doing some really interesting things with personal financial management and loan origination in a way that integrates it so that you can even consider applying for a loan on a mobile device, which is just pretty revolutionary. So I think Sandstone's really pushing the boundaries there. Tibco has a really interesting new solution that has some offer and payment integration into mobile banking that really leverages a new idea in communication between merchants and consumers, targeted marketing and geolocation. So, really pushing the boundaries of what a mobile device enables you to do there, and really trying to expand mobile banking's capabilities. And then Clarify, which is from Customer XTS, is really doing some awesome things with structured and unstructured data in an effort to try and allow financial institutions and relationship managers to react in real time to new events and really provide customized service to their clients. So, really a lot of stuff going on mobile. I only chose 3. There could be easily a dozen logos on this screen, but I have 10 minutes. So if you go to the next slide, trend number 2, user experience. Striata is doing some amazing things using new technology from Adobe and PDFs to drive adoption of paperless bills. They're seeing adoption rates of 60+% for some of their clients. The industry average is 15%. And they're doing things even beyond just simply turning off the paper and moving in terms of integrating marketing channels into the bills and even dispute resolution to try and reduce costs. So really interesting stuff in changing the user experience of billing. Backbase is doing some great stuff in terms of giving the power of segmentation and sort of online banking customization to the e-business team and taking it away from the IT team. So very interesting stuff there. And then Bankers Lab is really pushing the boundaries of sort of gamification in education. For financial institutions specifically, trying to do simulation and really change, the old methods to something new and better, and just, hopefully teach better bankers to build better banks. So trend number 2, again, could be a ton of companies here, but user experience innovation is something we're very interested in. So if you go to the third slide, big data. I mean, this is so exciting. We have so much good data out there now, and it's really about building tools to use it. BankBazaar is doing some neat things with almost instant credit approvals by pulling data together automatically. BMIS is trying to use non-traditional online and social data like social networks to help financial institutions make better credit decisions. EFL is trying to use psychometric principles, which basically equate the individual with their business to make better credit decisions. They've got some tremendous traction in South America and Africa, really interesting, innovative model. And then Pendo, which is trying to build, the first sort of cross-vertical global investment accounting solution. They won Swiss InnoTribe competition in Singapore back in, I think it was April. Really interesting solution, huge problem. So that's very exciting. If you go to the next trend, security. Metaphoric is a great new solution for making mobile apps more secure, specifically around mobile banking. Fraud Shield from Zigra is trying to do real-time fraud notifications to consumers and then crowdsource the results. So, a lot of interesting security stuff going on. And then the final trend is I try and wrap this up in 10 minutes or less. If you go to the last slide. Crowd and social and peer-to-peer. So, the Society One and Pandai are the first 2 peer-to-peer lenders in Australia and China, respectively. What they're doing with risk modeling is very interesting as they sort of, chart, new territory in their countries. Trade Hero and Yondo are doing very interesting things around sort of social trading, this idea that you could be able to follow the best traders and copy them. And then Currency Fair, which is doing peer-to-peer currency trades and really, giving better rates, lower costs, and have some tremendous traction. I think the last stat I saw was, 200 million euros have gone through the platform already. So, a ton of interesting companies on stage next week, and within these sort of 5 big trends that we're seeing among many others. So, I'm very excited to be here and talking to you. Hopefully I'll get a chance to see some of you next week or at a future Finovate. And Carol, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you very much, Eric. That was very interesting, and we wish you good luck with the conference next week. Now we'd like to hear from Melissa Guzzi of Arbor Partners. So, Melissa, can I turn it over to you? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And Eric and Ricardo and Asian Banker, thank you very much for the opportunity. I think a lot of what Eric talked about is quite exciting and actually segues very well to what Arbor Partners Asia is focused on. Just moving to the next slide, we'd like to say that we're a venture capital firm for the next new financial thing, which means that given what happened in 2008, we believe that there's significant opportunities for new financial institutions, whether it's lending or whether it's credit or whether it's from the borrower perspective, to be formed in this new market environment that we're facing. So if we go to the next slide, the Asian generational cliff. Today, banking and how people interact is very different than in the past. So, for example, very few people that are under the age of 30 actually walk into a bank branch. And by 2015, well over 70% of the Gen Yers, as we like to call them, or the millennials, or the Zuckerbergers will know what a bank branch is, but rather that due to the fact that they live most of their lives online, they'll be using online services, whether it's for traditional banking or lending or borrowing or credit. It doesn't much matter. A lot of the things that Eric talked about are incredibly important when you look at the Asian generational shift. If we go to the next slide, big data is the next financial innovation, and without big data will actually enable many things, whether it's looking at how companies are manufacturing and whether people are they can look at narrower segmentation and therefore do dynamic pricing. They will actually have far more instantaneous information where they can change whatever services that they're offering to attract more and more customers. I think as far as when you look at financial services goes, big data now enables many more things that just weren't possible in the past. If you go to slide 5, this is exactly it, which is the technology, whether it's delivery now on smartphones or iPads, its use of cloud computing so that startups actually can get into different businesses without huge infrastructure upfront cost. We have far more cross-border trading going on in Asia. There's tremendous amounts of influx of capital both into the region and also out of China, which is now being dispersed across Asia, which leads to many opportunities for trading, brokerage, settlements, anti-money laundering, payments, secondary markets. Tremendous amounts of new info. So how does big data come into it? There's more and more info being posted on the blogs, whether it's Weibo or Twitter or sentiment analysis for new products, new analytics. And additionally, transparency is now becoming more and more important. People are very concerned about the market data that's available and the quality of the data. I think all of this leads to what we were talking about earlier. Big data also leads to very much data overload. There's petabytes of global and local data online, and it's really about those companies that can aggregate it, analyze it, disseminate it, and make it useful for new companies to approach new markets that will ultimately be successful. And then finally, there's the new distribution models, which are, again, we get back to mobility, whether it's your smartphone or your iPad, or just being able to access it anywhere, anytime from another terminal. So if we go to the next slide, which is big data empowers new financial services, these are some of the markets that we're looking at. Alternative lending or P2P, peer-to-peer, or even small, medium enterprise lending is the area that's basically been starved since 2008, and we're seeing many new models be formed there. Financial information, I think as more and more people are trading cross-border, the integrity of financial information is becoming more relevant in different markets. Rather than tap to pay, I'd like to say the payment market is still interesting. We are continuing to see new solutions from startups every day to not only access what I would say more developed markets, but also more underdeveloped markets and the underbanked. Credit scoring, Eric mentioned earlier Demist, where we happen to be an investor in Demist, and we like the way that they're thinking about dynamic credit scoring, which means that more and more people are living their lives online and are much more willing to tell about themselves, and you can aggregate a tremendous amount of information, which is quite relevant. Wealth management, an area of the growing middle class. More and more people would like to take how they manage their newfound wealth or in their hands and understand more and more about financial instruments that are available. Sentiment analysis gets back a little bit about P2P and also the blogs, what people are saying, what are they doing, what are they thinking, more information about how companies are doing. And then I think finally the e-commerce sector, although B2C has been quite popular in Asia, I actually think that B2B has lagged behind, and we're going to see some companies that are formed there that actually can facilitate more efficient ways to do e-commerce across Asia, including settlement payments. And then finally, the cross-border trading activity, which I mentioned earlier, and I'll get into. I would like to bring up one point, which is on the left-hand side. 25% of prime credit customers in Asia who are traditionally underbanked are now reachable. If we go to the next slide, this one is just talking a little bit about DEMIST. They are actually presenting next week. We did this investment as a seed investment. We were the first money in. And the reason we very much liked it is I think big data is incredibly important. And I think that those companies that can actually aggregate information from the web, organize it, cleanse it, make it actionable and usable, and offer that on a per transaction basis with no upfront fees using the cloud can really redefine how we think about certain markets, from alternative lending to microfinance to leasing, and this more dynamic, valuable, and accurate information can not only help people who are currently getting loans, but I think really, truly address what I would say is the underbanked market who just may not be known to the common banker. If we go to the next slide is another solution. This is another company. We actually did this investment along Citi. Ricardo was part of that team, which is a cross-border trading platform that allows small, medium retail brokers in Asia to trade across different exchanges around the world without having to invest tremendous amounts of capital up front to access a new market. So very small brokerage companies, whether they're in Taiwan or Australia or Hong Kong or Singapore, can now offer their clients at a very reasonable price the ability to trade cross-border. The company also, which is not mentioned here, has a site called TradePop, which is more a social investment site where people around the globe can actually share their ideas about different portfolios and different stocks in their local regions. If you go to the next slide, which I think is the end, we are just a very brief overview on Arbor. We are focused on the big data ecosystem and specifically on fintech. We like to do early stage investments, so it can be from initial seed investments all the way up to I would say Series A or Series B. But our idea is to work very, very closely with the entrepreneur to address global markets. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melissa. That was a very interesting presentation. Can I just pick up one point with you, if you could just come back online? One of our listeners has just asked, could you just at this point just elaborate a little bit about alternative lending and what you're seeing there?
Yeah, so alternative lending is peer-to-peer, and I think Eric mentioned a couple. Well, it's two types. It's peer-to-peer, and it's also what I would say peer to small medium enterprise. So I think Eric brought up a couple of companies that are going to be presenting also next week. But what we mean by peer-to-peer is today it's very, very difficult for individuals without large amounts of credit history to go to a bank. And maybe Ricardo will prove me wrong on this, but go to a bank and get loans for very small amounts of money, $10, $20, $100,000. It's also very difficult in China, even for small, medium enterprises, to access capital at the large state-owned banks. So what peer-to-peer lending is that there are individuals who have always been willing to loan. I think this is since the 1700s, and there's people who are need to borrow. And it's about putting these technology platforms together where the borrowers and the lenders can come together. And additionally, it's also using credit analysis, a little bit like DEMIST or maybe some of the other companies that Eric mentioned, where you can actually get a sense of the type of credit quality somebody will be, and you can actually price the loans much more effectively. So you don't necessarily need to charge outrageously high interest rates, but more that you can do it based upon their credit risk. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Now, if we could move to Ricardo from Citi Ventures. Ricardo, please.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Carol, and thanks, the Asian banker, for the opportunity. Well, firstly, I mean, I agree with Melissa. I think just to add into this alternative lending, it's pretty much what Melissa described, but just to add, is like completely taking the middleman from the picture, which is us, the bank, right? So if you look from what banks supposed to do, they take money from people who have money and they give money to people who need money, right? And they charge. They charge a fee, which is our spread, and that's how we make money. So alternative lending is just connecting those two people, but in a P2P way, and then completely taking the banks or the middleman out of the picture, and in a very social and engaging way. And there are big companies in the U.S. and the U.K. as well, and I think there's a trend, as Melissa said, it might be coming to Asia. Some companies are already here, but not in the same scale as it is in the U.S. and in U.K. Just to start off my presentation, if you go to the next page, page 2, we would like to spend like 1 minute sharing the background of City Ventures, because as Carol said, we have different views in terms of venture capitalism and entrepreneurship. City Ventures is not as the way traditional VCs are. We are very much a corporate VC, and the first thing we do, I mean, there's 3 things that pretty much City Ventures does. The first is a traditional corporate venture VC. So we're not only investing for the sake of return, but we're investing in companies that we're interested in the technology and the innovation of the idea, and we want to invest because we want to buy this innovation capability and bring it into City. The second thing we do is we invest internally in what we call incubation. So we build new business based on the trends that we see outside, based on the ideas and the inspirations that we get from entrepreneurs. We build ideas that are supportive with the partnership with the local business, but to fulfill the emerging needs of our customers. And the third thing is really innovation, because across all of these things, really our charter is to keep the innovation edge of City, because as in the case of the alternative lending, if we're not aware of those trends, I mean, really banks could become irrelevant in the future. So for us, is to keep the edge and keep innovating and creating new products. They are following the trends of what's going on in the entrepreneurs ecosystem. If you go to the next slide, a quick overview. I mean, there's some focus areas where we look at, but if you want to summarize, it's pretty much three things. The first is like really trying to drive a customer-centric design approach. So customers and clients, they want their experience with us to be as simple, as intuitive as it can be, right? And they want products and services that are tailored to their needs and made available seamless and anytime, anywhere. So that's been changing a lot recently, but that's like one of the focus for us, because primarily if you go to banks, I mean, that's truly not the experience that most of the customers will get, and hence for us is one of the focus. The second trend, I think that goes without saying, is the world of digital and mobile. I mean, we live on the mobile world. In years to come, finance will be embedded in our lives, so much so as electricity is being embedded in houses, right? So consumers and business will have access to those numbers of financial applications, each as easy to use as going to be to use like an iPhone app, and so on. And the third thing is, at the end of the day, we're a bank, right? And in the bank, I mean, we facilitate trades, and we're interested in people's views about money. I mean, if you look at history. I mean, you used to do coins and metals, and then going to physical cash, and then digital like credit card, prepaid cards, and now nuances such as alternative currencies such as loyalty programs, credit card miles, airline miles, and so on. So all of those ways of enabling trends and what are the impact to people's life and how they foresee currencies. It's another trend and another focus area that we are interested on. If you go to the next slide, please. So just to share a couple of next slide, please. Thank you. Couple of solutions that we're working on. First is like this whole idea of bank in the box, which is the previous slide actually. So of course the world is moving more towards online and mobile and so on, right? So but still there's a very large fraction of our customers who still prefer to go into physical space, but also they prefer to do it in different ways, right? So can we create a form of providing services that currently can't be delivered through like a mobile online space or channel, such as the need for cash or deposit a check and so on and so forth. So the notion of a bank in the box that you can be in much more places, anywhere, anytime, is one of the things that we invest heavily internally. The second thing, and as you can see in this slide, is the whole notion of big data, as both Eric and Melissa alluded to that point. It's a huge trend, and for us as well. We're a bank, and we sit into a huge amount of information. Basically, we know a lot of things about consumers, not only about their names, where they live, what they buy, where they go, where they don't like to go, and you can create and use those data and predict many things, like even like crazy things like when people will divorce, or when people will what people will buy next, where they're gonna move, and so on and so forth. But of course, from a customer centricity point of view, what we're interested here is to provide like unbiased services and solutions that fulfill their unmet needs of our customers, right? And as you have heard, I mean, IBM has developed this technology that they call Watson, that for the first time has beat the man in terms of this game called Jeopardy. And the machine has a huge capability to, number one, store a large amount of data, but also process those data in a real time, and also have like a voice recognition that respond to voice command. So really, then the hypothesis is, can those machines replace bankers or banks that are in some places being seen as people who push product and not necessarily push the right solution for me as a customer? So this is some of the use case that we're working on, and truly leveraging the big data technology. Next slide, please. So if you want to talk about trends, I think, I mean, there are many trends, and I completely agree with all the trends that Melissa and Eric have presented. But from a banking perspective, just select 3 trends that we really see here happening, which will really shape up how banks position themselves, as well as creating services and products. The first one is the notion of customers are in control, right? So customer needs arguably are not changing, but the way they behave and the way they're behaving really are changing, right? Because of these new trends and because of those new reality and these new worlds that we live in today. So Melissa said, talk about the Generation Y, right? Those are generation, the people who don't have loyalty to brands, right? So they want to have more choices, and they ask for simplicity. They want things quick and fast. So we call them the instant generation, that they want instant approval, they want instant decisions, and so on and so forth. And also personalization, right? Because they want mass customization. They want products and services that are really tailored to their needs, or at least they want to be able to customize based on what they want to see. Next next slide, please. Is in this scenario, I mean, we go from like from a sales perspective, the way how sales we've been selling our products and services. It come from like a door-to-door to like branch to direct sales to web and to mobile apps and so on. And I think the word here now is like empowerment, right? And just to give an example, I mean, for those who are in Asia, Citibank is pretty much like a wealth management, top of the pyramid service provider. And traditionally in Asia, most of the wealth is being held into the first generation, the guys who built their companies and like millionaires and so on, and they lost their money. But there's a shift in terms of inheritance, and their sons and daughters are taking over. And when our banks go and approach that, and they're like, listen, I don't want to talk to you. Empower me to make me to enable me to make better financial decisions, and I don't need to talk to you. Just empower me. Give me an app. Give me access to a tool that I can read, I can be informed, and I can make my decisions, right? So in this scenario, I mean, services would not be sold, right? They will be bought because they are really, consumers and customers are really driving the experience here. Next slide, please. So if you look at banks even today, we're pretty much like a supermarket, right? So we're a supermarket for financial products. And we are facilitators. And on today's digital age, banks will evolve from become like selling those particular products, as I mentioned, a door-to-door or branch-based, to become like a really large e-commerce and mobile commerce provider, right? And they will have like smart and real-time and perhaps elegant way of selling. It'll be much more contextualized, like information and news and services that are really relevant to me as a person that's like tailored to my particular needs. The banks are to understand. And see, I mean, the non-intrusive and perhaps time-sensitive engagement model with those consumers. So much so, perhaps Amazon is leading that. So you go and you buy something, and then you say, well, customers who buy product A or buy this product also buy that particular product. So it's very elegant and non-intrusive way of like cross-selling other products. And really, in this scenario, I mean, banks will become like large e-commerce and mobile commerce. Next slide, please. So payments, right? Being asked, and I always ask because we are one of the large players in this space, being asked most of the time to provide my views and the bank views in this payment space. I think my colleagues, they allude to that as well. But my view is very simple. It's like, who knows, right? So for those close to what we have done at Citi and Citi Ventures, I mean, 4 or 5 years ago, we've been making our bets. Citi was the first kind of financial institution to make a NFC trial in Bangalore 4 or 5 years ago. That really called the attention to the world and say really big banks are moving to technology like near-field communication and so on. And then you start seeing the ecosystem evolve and have the networks, the telcos, and the cards providers start like investing in those kind of technology. And we have also invested in some other technologies such as P2P and SMS-based and so on. But 5 years has passed, and really today, which 5 years I would believe NFC will be definitely the way for payments and how mobile payments will be done, at least from a proximity payment perspective. Today, I really don't know, and I don't think anyone knows what's going to happen because the ecosystem is really evolving, and you're having, as you can see here on the right-hand side of my slide, all the players are there. You have the technology companies there. You have pure much payment companies. You have telcos. You have banks. You have non-banks. And you have companies like Square that's just focusing on payments, PayPal, and so on. So the jury, I think, is still up. There's no clear global winners yet. There are some sort of winners forming in some markets, but I think still up in the air in terms of what's going to happen, what kind of technology, and how that's going to be made. So I think it's bad news and good news. The good news is that there's still plenty of opportunities, but the reality is the bad news is that everybody's into this space, right? Because it's a huge market, billions of dollars, and all the big players will be there, and will be very few space for new players to come and really try to win this entire ecosystem, because as I mentioned, it's a huge market. Final slide, next page. Being asked to talk about Asia and why Asia in this context of Finovate coming to Asia. I mean, simply said, I mean, if you look at all the companies, if you look at the growth opportunity, most of them, they're looking at Asia as one of the hugest growth. I mean, Citi is not an exception. But it's also, if you look from a macroeconomic standpoint, I mean, it's the fastest growing region, right? I mean, and very soon, 2/3 of the populations will be here in Asia. Asia has also a great mix of these, what we call the developed and the developing markets. Truly, you have like what I call the old developed markets, such as the North Asia, like Japan, Taiwan, perhaps Korea. You have what I call the old developing markets like China and India, and I mean old developing because we've been talking about China and India and so on for many years already, right? So, and then you also have the new developing markets, which is the ASEAN, right? I mean, here for those who are here in Singapore, truly you see a lot of these headquarters sitting here in Asia, but really focus on Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, and etc. So it's a huge market opportunity. And also you have the future developing markets like Myanmar, Bhutan, Laos, Vietnam, all of those like new places that many companies are going to tap into this opportunity. So truly, Asia has all of that, right? So for those that are less conservative, they want to go to a more developed place, you have it. For those that are very aggressive, very bold, want to be first and pioneer, you also have a market for that. The other notion is 6 out of 10 top countries in terms, and you see here in this slide, top 10 countries in terms of internet penetration, they are in Asia, right? Because of the notion that the population here, because of the notion that companies are here to invest, and because the consumer market is growing, so then the internet penetration is growing, and that brings us a lot of opportunities because guys like you, like entrepreneurs and so on, will come and tap into this growth opportunity as well. But the final thought here, however, though, which is a kind of a provoking question in the way I see Asia, I think that there are money, right? There are opportunities, but I think one thing that lacks a little bit is this notion of creativity, right? I see a lot of companies, and if we compare that to other developed venture capital ecosystems such as the Valley, I think you compare these two places, I mean, there's a big we lag behind in terms of creativity, and that's why I'm excited to have Finovate here and excited to the opportunities. I mean, it's just a question of time. Creativity is coming, it's improving, and it's going to continue to improve for the next years or so. So that's my pretty much what I want to cover today.
Thank you very much indeed, Ricardo. Again, another very insightful presentation. We're now open to a question and answer session. So if anybody does have a question, please use your chat box in the bottom right-hand corner and send your question through to the host, and we'll raise it with our panelists. I have a couple of questions through already. One of our listeners would like to know what the view on telcos in the banking value chain is. Do they see them as friend or foe? Ricardo, perhaps could you address this one to kick off with? Do you see much innovation around this with the telcos that perhaps crosses into the banking value chain?
Yeah, sure. Very, very interesting question, by the way. So I think really the reality here is that telcos, I mean, some of them, they took a while to figure out how to adapt into this new world and how to monetize in different ways. If you look at the first, I mean, the pioneers one, let's take an example of Docomo in Japan, right? Many years back, they figured that voice would be gone and people would be making calls for free, right? And they say, okay, what are the new ways to monetize? And they start investing heavily on data. And especially on the payment side, they invest in they bought companies and so on. They really try to create new business model that comes across like payments, which is like the space where banks are supposed to be, right? So hence, in order to keep them alive, they need to figure out new revenue lines for that, for the telcos. Similarly, the banks are in perhaps arguably in a similar situation whereby, I mean, to use the example again of this lending, alternative lending, there are alternative ways for people to use money, right? And different than the traditional ways that has been done before. So from the banking perspective, we're looking for new ways, and we try to invade other spaces like payments and telcos and so on and so forth. And from a telco perspective, it's the same thing. They try to come into different ways and invade different spaces and try to monetize. Is that a rivalry here? Do we see like a big issues and so on? I think yes and no, depends on how you position and how you create the solutions, right? So reality is, from our perspective, when we're trying to build like mobile payments, from our customer perspective, we want to create like a telco agnostic solution, right? So that's why making a partnership to one telco only, it might not be the way to go, because customers like in Singapore, they have phones with 3 different providers, and in all the countries that you go is the same thing. There's no like a monopoly of the telco service, so you want to create something that's more agnostic. From a telco perspective, it's the same thing. They want to create a mobile wallet and try to monetize on data in some other forms. Similarly, they want their customers to have the option to use credit cards from different banks, or even different bank accounts, or not even a bank account, just a store value account. So it depends how you see, but I don't see like a rivalry, because some of the markets as well. Another point that I want to bring is the regulation, right? In some markets, like India, for example, is very clear stated that whenever there's a store value or has some money associated to it, you need to have a bank license, which means telco cannot be part of it unless they go and they buy a company, or they apply for a bank license. That's my view.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We'll move on to another subject. Another question here is how does P2P a P2P platform? How do you think a P2P platform will evolve in Asia over the next 3 to 5 years? Melissa, could you perhaps address that? Do you see many innovations in this area? Do you have a view on P2P?
Oh, absolutely. I think that P2P is just at the beginning in Asia. I think compared to what we've seen in the U.S. with Prosper and with Lending Club, I think that Asia particularly is just at the beginning stages. So if you take, for example, and part of that is due to regulation. For example, in China, it's still pretty much a gray area, although you have a couple of companies now operating in it. And eventually what we'll see, I think, is regulation that comes out and says, and we'll have some more guidelines. But I also believe that if you take all of Asia and you include Singapore and Hong Kong, the Philippines, and Thailand and Vietnam, etc., there's still this tremendous need for peer-to-peer lending for small loans. I think part of probably what has held it up in development, one is been regulation, 2 is cross-border nature of probably how it will develop, and finally the third is getting a sense of accountability and trustworthiness as far as making loans. And I think that gets back to some of the new ways that people can do credit analysis on either the lenders or in some cases even in borrowers. So I think we're just at the beginning of peer-to-peer lending, and I think also besides peer-to-peer lending, we may even see peer-to-peer insurance at some point in time. So it's a pretty exciting area and very underdeveloped relative to Europe and the US.
Well, thank you. Eric, have you seen a lot of innovative ideas come in terms of your conference in relation to P2P?
Certainly we have a number of them. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, we've got a couple peer-to-peer lenders, one from China and one from Australia, who are really, sort of in uncharted territory for their respective countries, in terms of actually lending money and really trying to figure out the risk model. If you look at how Prosper, launched in the States and acquired great momentum originally, but also struggled tremendously with defaults, early on. So can they learn from Prosper's mistakes and apply those lessons and innovate for their respective countries? And then Currency Fair, I think, is another great example, this idea of peer-to-peer sort of currency trading. So I think that peer-to-peer is such a broad concept, whether it's peer-to-peer payments or peer-to-peer lending or peer-to-peer, trading of currencies. And I think that in the States even right now, you start to see people starting to do niche peer-to-peer lending plays, whether trying to do it in real estate or small business or, trying to build a platform that banks can actually use to do some sort of peer-to-peer. So I think there is some really interesting applications, and it's not, and we are really just starting to scratch the surface.
Okay, thank you. I have another question about cloud technology. Again, well, in fact, let me come back to Eric with you. Very many innovations to do with the cloud, and how much has security been a dampener on this, do you think?
Well, I think that the cloud, I mean, it all depends how you want to define that term to some extent. So I think that we will continue to do more and more things online, that data will live online, whether it's banks putting more and more stuff online or financial technology startups or whatever it may be. So, more and more of our data is going to go into the cloud. And thus it will need to become more and more secure, especially as, things like financial data live more and more in the cloud. But beyond that, like, what is the cloud? Is it private cloud? Is it public cloud? I think there's a lot of technical aspects in terms of that question. And so I think that the truth is the trend is happening. And so it's how do we secure it going forward, which is, honestly a huge market opportunity.
Yeah. Well, perhaps Ricardo, could I pick that question up with you? Do you have a view?
Yeah, I was just going to ask. I mean, as to add and introduce. I think I agree with Eric. I would just want to add from a banking perspective, and we normally anytime we go into a new technology or new solution, we need to talk to our regulators, right? And I can say regulators, they panic. One, they don't know exactly what cloud is, but only to hear the word of cloud, they really panic, right? So there's really some skepticism even internally because of that. But I think, as Eric said, it depends how you define cloud, right? So if you have your private cloud, which is to me is a big server that you're putting up there, and sometimes you can share, sometimes you can share internally, you share with other companies and so on and so forth. I mean, it all comes back to how secure the server is, right? And arguably, as technology evolves, I mean, it's going to be as secure as putting your banking servers or banking data center into those large servers that we use today, right? So I think it's just a question of time. You evolve. I think it's new technology, cheaper way of storing information more efficiently. It will get there, but I think it will take time, especially because regulators will need to have their saying and we need to get their approvals as well.
Okay, thank you. And I'm afraid, Ricardo, I've got another question I need to come back to you on. Could you elaborate a little bit more about near-field communication, NFC, You know,
Yeah.
What do you think will happen in this? What is your view?
Yeah, and so yeah, I wish I had a crystal ball on this because we've been investing in this space, and if you asked me 3 years ago, my answer was absolute bullish on the NFC space. Um, Asking me today, I'm like I really don't know yet. We're building wallets. We invest in companies who provide NFC solutions. We participate on the call for collaboration in some countries like Singapore and so on to really enable the ecosystem. I think the reality is the sunk cost involved to make that happen and what I call to enable and to create the ecosystem, like the POS machines, the mobile phones, the stickers, the over-the-air authentication, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It really costs a lot of money. And if you want to develop that, you can't do it yourself, right? You can't create a solution like a bank-only solution, one banking trying to drive it. You need to have all the players coming together and doing it, hence the call for collaboration. As you know, in Singapore, 5 years ago, we had the first call for collaboration to try to enable that ecosystem because it's clearly seen as providing economic value to users and to consumers, so hence the government is behind it. But it will take time, and this time around is the second call for collaboration. I really don't know if it's going to happen. And we're talking about a small market like Singapore, which arguably is easier than other large markets like United States or UK and so on. But if you take other examples like Japan, again, like Docomo, they try to move by themselves and they start because of the cash they had in their hands and because of trying to monetize and create new revenue lines for their traditional telco business. They invest heavily, right? So they bought POS machines, they bought banks, they bought service providers, and they really try to create the near field communication. And it to me is a very successful start because you have vendor machines, you have transportation, you have mobile payments, all of that using the same standard and the same technology, and that is evolving. But again, it's the entire ecosystem, and you need to have all the players in order to enable that because it's really costing and it will take time.
Okay, yes, as you say, it's a difficult call on that one, but you're no longer very bullish from what I understand you're saying. I'm wondering if we have time. I think unfortunately we are running out of time now, so I am going to draw this consultation to a close. But to say a very big thank you to each of our three guests and speakers for such interesting and insightful presentations. I gather that Melissa and Ricardo, you'll both be at Finovate, the Finovate conference next week. So I do hope you find that a fruitful time for yourselves. And indeed, we wish Eric a very successful conference and hope this will be the start of many such forums here in Asia. The Asian bank is always very keen to hear about innovative ideas and the use of innovative technology in financial services. So do please keep us posted of any interesting stories that you feel should be told. We're always very willing to hear and report on them. Also, I'd just like to draw to your attention that we have our annual IT Implementation Awards coming up shortly. So if there are any banks or vendors out there who'd like to submit to the awards, please do so. We'll shortly be putting out the instructions on how to do this. So thank you very much once again for listening in, and we look forward to welcoming you again in the future at our future teleconsultations. Thanks very much.
Thank you.